All right, we'll say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning. Sure to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Cheshvan, Silvie and Teri Czinn, for dedicating all the Shuman Drushos this month in honor of the birth of their granddaughter, Devorah Eliana Czinn, and the commemoration of the Yahrzeit of Dr. Zinn's father, Bunim Tzvi Ben Chaim, Shmuel Robyn Korobkin, and the zechus of Rabin's cousin serving in the IDF, Benyamin Chaim Pesach ben Musha Chana, and the commemoration of the Yahrzeit of Rabin's mother, Pesa Mira Chaim, Dr. Moshe and Gavant, in memory of Dr. Gavant's parents, Yakov, Meir ben Moshe, Leib, and Shayna Bas Abba. Week of Learning sponsors, Judy Posner, in memory of Shimshon Laser ben Moshe, Chaim ben Elioah Cohen, Dinel Yehuda ben Shimshon Laser, Leah Sol, in memory of Salma Wolf. May her memory be an inspiration for us all. And Daf Yomi today, Paul and Kathy Palik, in creation of the Yahrzeit of Rachel Imenu. Incredible. So we should open the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the Neshavos and Aliyah, the families in Nechama, all of those who require a refuah sheleima, should have one together with Kol Cholei Yisrael. Kodesh Baruch Hu should bring our hostages home, B'Shalom and B'Karov, and our holy soldiers should be successful b'chol ma'asei yedehem. But with that, let us begin. So we have a lot to do today. I apologize in advance. We have to stop a few minutes earlier than usual today. But Amir Hashem, short daf, we'll get through everything. So we are picking up on today's daf is Kuf Mem 140. We are picking up on Kuf Lamed Tesma Beis 139b, and we are picking up last line. So let's say, remember again. The Mishnah introduced us to this idea that father dies, Father Yakov dies and leaves behind sons and daughters. So again, the division is as follows. Sons inherit, daughters receive support. Now obviously, again, if there are no sons, then daughters will inherit. But the interesting idea that the Mishnah introduced us to is what happens if there's not enough in the estate for both inheritance and support. What happens then? So halacha l'maisa, the Mishnah said, support trumps inheritance. So in that case, daughters will go ahead and receive support from the estate, and sons, again, the lashon of the Mishnah was, yachsiru ala psachim. Let them go collect, let them go door to door, and essentially they'll go and they'll figure it out. So the Gemara says, so interestingly enough, so essentially the way the Mishnah termed this was, there's two different types of estates. There's what we call nechasim merubim and nechasim mu'atim. Nechasim merubim, the definition is, again, that there's, at least right now the way we're defining it is, there's enough in the estate to support the girls until they reach the age of bagrus, 12 and a half years old, or marriage. So if there's enough in the estate for that, then again, part of it will go for support, and then the other part will go for the inheritance of the sons. Less than that amount is called nechasim mu'atin. Small estate. What happens with nechasim mu'atin? Daughters are supported, and sons, again, are left to fend for themselves. So the Gemara said, last line, so now, let me get this straight. So if the estate is what we call nechasim mu'atin, so therefore, again, there is not enough to provide support up for both of them until bagrus, top of kuf mem, shakli lehu banos lekulu, so the daughters get everything. In other words, the Gemara is just intrigued by this idea that support for the daughters would effectively usurp any type of inheritance rights, right? Remember again, support for the daughters is a rabbinic concept. It's one of the Tanai Ksuva. Going ahead and inheritance is a biblical concept. So it is intriguing to see that support for the daughters would go ahead and usurp anything else. Ella Amarav Rav says, no. Motziin lahem mizonos labanos achi bagru bashar labanim. Rav is like this. In the case of nechasim mu'atim, what we would do is like this. We would essentially identify what is the amount of money, right? What is the amount of money necessary to support the daughters up until bagrus? Let's identify that amount. Let's pull that out of the estate. Let's pull that out. And now again, so that'll be the amount that goes for the daughters. And ultimately, again, the rest will be inheritance. Now again, that presupposes that there's a rest, right? That presupposes that there's money left over, but that's how we would calculate this out. So the Gemara says, fine. So we'll say, so therefore, that's the end of the first sugya. So what we are left with is two different types of estate. Nechasim merubin, nechasim mu'atin. Nechasim merubin means that there's more than enough to provide for the support of the girls until they reach the age of bagrus or marriage, in which case, again, will allocate that amount, give the rest for inheritance for the boys. Nechasin mu'atin, less than that amount. So in other words, there's not enough to go ahead and support the girls until bagrus or until marriage. In that case, again, we'll allocate everything to the support of the daughters, and the sons will have to go figure something else out, not relying on inheritance. Now the Gemara brings a variation of this case, which is actually quite interesting. So Pshita, Merubin v'nismatu. So we'll say, what about the following case? So let's say Yakov dies, he leaves behind an estate. So the estate was worth a certain amount, and then nismatu, the value of the estate diminishes. Now the Rashbam points out over here, if you look at the Rashbam, it's almost right across, if you go right. So Pshita Merubin v'nismatu, b'shas misa, hayu merubin, bi'achshav hokiru mizonos, onis kalkalu hanechasim, dechasru, va'in bahen kedei mazon elu li'elu ad shiyabagru. Silva says this is very interesting. So now listen to the following scenario. So there's two different ways this case could occur, right? Either halacha l'maisa, that the value of the estate actually diminished, or the price of food went up. Either way, the value of the estate is not the same that it was before. So in other words, when Yakov died, the value of the estate was X, and then it depreciates, X minus Y, for whatever the reason. Assets depreciate, or cost of food goes up. So what's talach in this case? I will say now, the idea over here is, as a result, there's not enough money in the estate to provide for the sons and the daughters mizonos up until the age of bagrus. There's not enough in the estate. So the Gemara says, so what happens in a situation like this? Kvar zachu b'hain yarshim. So the halacha is that we lock in, essentially, what we're going to see over here is, entitlements are determined at the time of death, which is when the estate distribution essentially is determined. So when Yaakov dies, what we look at is, we look at the value of the estate at that moment. So that determines, is this nechasim merubin, in which case, again, there's support and inheritance, or is this nechasim mu'atim, in which case there's just support and no inheritance. But all of that is locked in at the time of death. So that's what it means when it says kvar zachu b'hain yarshim. So in other words, if the estate had the value at the time of Yaakov's death, that there was enough for support of the girls and inheritance for the boys, that's locked in. And even if the estate subsequently diminishes in value, we just carry those proportions down with us as well. The Rashbam says over here is kvar zachu b'hain yarshim. Rashbam, actually now right across. B'shas misa savien, de karinan bohu nechasim merubim. V'yikchu habanos chalkan hamagim kefi shuma shel shas misas havien v'abanim yirshu chelkam shayamagim ba'osa shas. So let's say, for example, at the time of death, the way we value Yakov is to say, just for argument's sake, let's say 30% was going to the daughters for support and 70% is going to inheritance. Those ratios are locked in, and so now even though the estate subsequently diminishes in value, those percentages follow us. Fascinating. What about the opposite case? Mu'atin v'nisrabu mai. What happens if halacha l'maisa, at the time that Yaakov died, right, the estate was what we'll call nechasin mu'atin. And then what happens? Subsequently, the estate appreciates. So now what's the halacha in this case? So the Gemara says, on one hand, do we say birshus yarshin kaimi? Hilchach birshus yarshin shavua? Do we say that the estate is considered to be in the domain of the Yarshim, and therefore any appreciation belongs to the Yarshim, to the Yarshim in this context means the sons. Or maybe not. Maybe, since at the time of death, this is what we call a nechasin mu'atin estate. Therefore what? What happens in the nechasin mu'atin estate? I will say, sons get nothing, daughters get support. So effectively, the sons are removed from this estate, and therefore do not share in the appreciation, right? A fascinating shayla. Take a look at the Rashbam. The Rashbam says, Mahu, mi mati ravcha lebanim, v'yitlu moser nechasim. Do we say that the appreciation goes to the sons, and therefore, again, they should take the additional amounts? Okay, suppose here's the case. So Yaakov dies, and at the time of Yaakov's death, the status of the estate was nechasim mu'atin. In nechasim mu'atin, daughters will get mizonos, sons will get nothing. So the estate appreciates. So I will say, so now let's say it becomes a nechasim merubin. So the shayla is, who gets the appreciation? So on one hand, we could say, well, an estate technically belongs to inheritors, to the son, therefore the son should get the appreciation. On the other hand, at the time of death, the sons were really removed from the estate because it wasn't the chasen mu'atin. In which case, maybe only the daughters get the appreciation. Good kasha. Let's analyze. So Tashma, Tam Rabbi Yasi, Am Rabbi Yochanan, Yisomim shekadmu, umachru b'nechasen mu'atin. So this is actually very interesting. So let's say again, a typical case in nechasen mu'atin. Yakov dies. The estate is nechasen mu'atin. What's the halacha with nechasen mu'atin? Daughters get mizonos, sons get nothing. Let's say the sons went ahead and sold the estate. Right, so there was Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and Dinah and Leah. So Dinah and Leah, so now from the Nechasim should get mizonos. Sons should not really get anything. But let's say Reuven went ahead and sold the estate property. What's the halacha? So the Gemara says, Ma shemachru machru. Even though Reuven should not do this, if he did it, it works. What does that show you? That even in a case of Nechasim mu'atin, the sons own it. So it's almost what's happening over here, and it's fascinating. In the case of the Nechasim mu'atin, what's coming out of it is as follows. The sons own it. They just don't get to collect on it. In other words, you can't abrogate the halachas of Yerusha. We've seen this so many times before. Right? This is the way it works. Yerusha is a biblical concept. So the Torah says that when Yakov dies, his estate goes to his sons. Now it happens to be that the Rabbanim step in, right? Chazal step in, and Chazal say, whoa, hold up. If it's a small estate in the Nechasim mu'atin, we're going to allow the daughters to collect their mizonos before you get any Yerusha. But the sons still have an identity as inheritors, which is why if they go ahead and they sell off the estate, as much as that is illegal and they should not do that, it works. What does that show you based on this? If when Yaakov dies, it's Nechasim mu'atin, and subsequently the estate appreciates, who should get that appreciation? The sons. The sons. Beautiful. So Rav Yosef, Rabbi Yirmiyah, so therefore again, Salach al-Maisa turns out that if when Yakov dies, it's Nechasim merubin, and it subsequently depreciates, the percentages of Mazonos versus Yerusha are locked in at the time of death, and those are applied even then subsequently to Nechasim mu'atin. If on the other hand, when Yakov dies, it's Nechasim mu'atin, and then the estate appreciates, so as much as Nechasim mu'atin, only daughters get Mazonos, sons don't get Yerusha, Halach al-Maisa, the sons will share in the appreciation. Okay, beautiful. Let's go weiter. Yasser Rabbi Yirmiyah kameid Rabbi Avo v'kabay minei. Supposed to see some really interesting cases over here. So Rabbi Yirmiyah was sitting in front of Rabbi Avo, and he asked him the following shaylos. Al menuso mahu shetemait b'nechasim. Shabbos said this is fascinating. So now, what we begin to see is the son-daughter relationship in the estate is fundamentally determined by how you categorize the estate. Is the estate nechasim merubin or is it nechasim mu'atin? So here's the interesting shayla. Let's say Yakov dies and Yakov is married to Rachel. So now the shayla is like this: the estate has an obligation to support Rachel. That's one of the Tanai Ksuva. So the shayla is as follows. When calculating whether or not the estate is nechasim merubin or nechasim mu'atin, do we subtract out the amount of support that the estate is going to be chayiv to Rachel or not? Right? Because we'll see. Should we take that out? Should we take that out of the pot, so to speak? And then do we look at the estate minus that amount in order to determine whether or not it's nechasim or nechasim mu'atin? Such a good shayla. Ma'ashet temait b'nechasim. So so do we say Gavant? So I'll say, by the way, you could see that could have major ramifications. In other words, you could have an estate that is nechasim merubin, but then when you go ahead and you identify the amount of mizonos, now obviously mizonos is going to be a projection. It's going to be a projection because you don't know what's going to happen. Is Rachel going to remarry? Is Rachel going to die? So there. But again, let's assume that we could create a certain projection. So the shayla is like this: do we take that off the top in determining whether or not this is nechasim or nechasim mu'atin? So again, one more time. So amanuso mashtamai b'nechasim. So do we go ahead and look at the amount of mizonos that an almana would take and subtract that off the top of the estate? So miyar minan kevan de estate mizonim memata. So do we say that since the almana is entitled to mizonos, that ultimately again should diminish the value of the estate, and therefore again perhaps nechasim merubin becomes nechasim mu'atin. O dilma kevan de lumin saba lesle hashta lesla hashtanami lesla. Or on the other hand, no, you can't bring mizonos of the almana into this equation. Why not? Because as we just said before, why not? It's a variable. What's the variable? Maybe, she'll meet someone nice during Shiva, right? And go ahead, right? And remarry afterwards. You never know. There's a lot of people in and out of the house, right? So maybe Lamaisa, again, she'll get remarried relatively quickly. And therefore, again, maybe mizonos doesn't factor in. The Gemara is last night. Furthermore, imtin salomar kevan de ilumin saba lesla hashta nami lesla. So, okay, so let's assume for a moment that maybe when calculating whether or not this is nechasim merubin nechasim muatin, maybe we don't take into account mizonos of an almana, right? Maybe we don't really take into account. Why? Because it's possible that that's not really going to cost the estate all that much in the event that she gets remarried relatively quickly. What about the following case? What about bas ishto mahu shetemait ben chasim? What about the case of, I'll say, bas ishto? Now remember again, Ruven marries Rachel. So one of the Tanai Ksuva is that, or I should say it differently, we shouldn't frame it as Tanai Ksuva. The way the Rashbam identifies this case, if you look at the Rashbam, it's about 10 lines up from the bottom. Bas ishto, misha kibel alav b'shas nisuin, lozun bas ishto mi'ish acher, chomish shanim, umeis, muta al yashin lezona. So we'll say here's the case. Ruven marries Rachel. Rachel had a daughter from a previous marriage. So they get married, and what happens? Reuven agrees to support Rachel's daughter for 5 years. Now that is a blanket obligation of support. So whether Rachel's daughter is married, unmarried, Reuven has agreed to support her. Now what's there in this case and the previous case? Right? In the Mizonos of Almana, what was our problem? We didn't really know how much that obligation would be worth or not worth, right? In other words, how long is she going to be supported? Is she going to marry, remarry, die, not die? Again, this case is a little bit easier to quantify because here, Reuven has committed himself to 5 years of support for Rachel's daughter. So again, just to plug this into the case. Reuven marries Rachel. She's coming in with a daughter from her previous marriage. Reuven agrees to support her daughter for 5 years. Now Reuven dies. So now the shayla is, do we take that amount of support and subtract that off the top of the estate? Now that's very important to us because that may be the difference between what? Nechasim merubin and nechasim muatin. So do we remove that from the estate? Do we subtract that off before we determine what type of estate this is? On one hand, kevan dichi minsaba nami isla umemata. On one hand, we can say, look, this is an absolute obligation, right? So even if this daughter marries, Reuven or Reuven's estate is still on the hook, right? It's still obligated to go ahead and pay her this money. O Dilma, kevan di'ilu mesa lesla v'lo. On the other hand, if she dies, then ultimately Reuven is not, or the estate is not obligated to pay her back. So we'll say, so this is question number 2, right? So again, question number 1 was support for the almana. We'll say, remember, just keep your eye on the ball over here. The nice part about this sugya is we understand that essentially, for our purposes right now, there are 2 different types of estates. What are the 2 different types of estates? Nechasim merubin and nechasim muatin. In nechasim merubin, everyone's happy. Daughters get support, sons get yerusha. In nechasim muatin, daughters get support, sons effectively get nothing. Although they don't really get nothing because, as we've demonstrated, that's what they still really are called yarshim. They're still called yarshim, and therefore, should the estate appreciate, they get that appreciation. But at least initially, they don't get any type of payout. So now, what we're trying to figure out is if the estate has expenses, do we take off those expenses from the amount of the estate before we determine if it's a nechasim merubin or nechasim muatin estate? That's the shayla. So question number 1 was amana. Right? Question number 2 was Reuven agreed to support his wife's daughter for an objective amount of time. Do we take that out? V'imtim salomar. So let's go weiter. Imtim salomar kevan deilu mesa lesla lo. Maybe you should say by the case of the daughter, we're not going to subtract out that amount, right? Why not? Because Lamaisa, that's also a variable. Just like mezonos of an almana are a variable, right? So you can't subtract that out because you don't know what's going to happen with the almana. Is she going to die? Is she going to get remarried? Same thing with the daughter. Maybe the daughter ultimately, again, is going to die also. Therefore, you don't subtract it out. What about the following case? Just keep a tally. The way that Rambam paskins so far is Rambam paskins, you do not subtract out the mezonos of an almana because it's a variable. Rambam also paskins, you do not subtract out the amount of money owed to the daughter, I should say the daughter from the first marriage, right? Once again, because it's a variable. These are non-fixed costs. So the Rambam so far holds that in any variable costs, you do not subtract that out of the value of the estate when determining if it's nechasim Reuben or nechasim Muatin, which now leads us to the next shayla. Watch this. Balchov ma'u shemai b'nechasim. Oh, okay, so this is interesting. Right? Reuven borrowed $100,000 from Shimon. Okay, now Reuven dies. So what's the halacha? What's the halacha when you die? When you die, you still owe money. It's incredible, right? Even when you die, you still owe money. So your estate has an obligation to pay back your debts. Right? Now both say, now remember, halacha l'maisa, this is a fixed amount. This is a fixed amount that is payable by the estate. So balchov ma'ushimai ben chasim. So we'll say, so should we subtract out that amount of the debt from the estate before determining if this is nechasim or nechasim muatin? On the one hand, Meir minan kevan dechi mayis nami islay mamayit. So we'll say, since at the end of the day, whether Reuven's alive or Reuven's dead, he owes the money. Odilma kevan de michsri govaina lo mamayit. On the other hand, no. On the other hand, since the debt has not been collected, so maybe it doesn't factor in. In other words, we'll say, so this now drills down to the core of the issue, which is when determining the value of the estate, nechasim Reuben versus nechasim muatin. So do we say at the end of the day, we look at the value of the estate as it is right now, or do we look at the value of the estate and also look at any outstanding obligations? And now we can make a distinction between what we'll call variable obligations versus fixed obligations. So variable obligations, maybe we could say because you can't determine the amount of it, we should not go ahead and bring it into the equation over here. So the mezonos for an almana, the mezonos for this daughter of Rachel, those are variable. But a balchov is not variable. Balchov is not variable. We know that Reuven owes Shimon $100,000, right? And that obligation devolves upon the estate as well. So should we take that off the top, or maybe not? Maybe since Shimon is not coming to collect it yet, so therefore we don't take it into account. Okay. Vika. So we'll say, so these are our kashas. So essentially there are three cases. Mezonos of an almana, mezonos of the daughter from her previous marriage, and balchov, and a debt. So the Gemara just points out over here, V'ika debayle le'idach gisa. So others just had an alternate reading of this. They just asked the question in the opposite order. Balchov ma'ashima ben chasim. So we'll say again, it's the same questions, just a different order. In our version, it was almana, wife's daughter from previous marriage, and balchov. In this alternate version, it's balchov ma'ashima ben chasim amadeis, bas ishto ma'ashima ben chasim. Almanaso ma'ushetamai b'nechazim. Okay, so in the alternate, in the second version, it was Balchov, daughter, and Almana, just the opposite. So the Gemara says, listen to this. Good. Almanasa, good. Base 140b, second line. Almanusa ubas eza mehen kodemes. So we'll say, so now, just as an aside, so first of all, the way we paskin is that halacha l'maisa, we'll say, essentially, the way Rama paskins is none of these things diminish the value of the estate. In other words, when determining whether or not an estate is nechasim Reuben or nechasim muatin, we just look at the value of the estate independent of any obligations against the estate. That's it. Which is interesting. Which is interesting because again, I don't know. I would have thought that the distinction between variable expenses versus fixed expenses would have been applied, but that's not how the Rambam paskins. Okay, now the Gemara said an interesting kasha. Amanoso ubas eza mehen kodemes. So now listen to this case. Let's say halacha l'maisa Reuben dies, right? Reuben dies, and Reuben leaves behind a widow, Rachel, right, and a daughter, Dinah. So we'll say, so now the shayla is, and let's say now the Rashbam points out to Baby, look at the Rashbam second line down from the top. Almanasa ubas ve'in kan ela mazon achas mehen u'shtein tovos mazonos b'tnai ksuva hilchach kiven ta'avai b'tekanta d'rabanon achli ezo tikton. It's an interesting shaila over here. So Reuven dies, leaves behind the widow, and leaves behind the daughter. Both of them are entitled to mazonos rabbinically, right? It's the Tnai Ksuva. That's right. So again, Rachel's Ksuva provides that she is entitled to her mazonos and her daughter is entitled to mazonos. But let's say the estate only has enough to provide one of them for mazonos. Who gets it? So Reuven's widow, Ubas and his daughter, Eza Mehen Kodemes. Who gets precedence from mazonos? Leib. So we'll say. So remember again, all of this, by the way. All of this was Rabbi Yirmiyah sitting before Rabbi Avo. Right? He's asking this question. So again, all of this is coming up. So what happens? So Rabbi Yirmiyah, Rabbi Avo says, just come back tomorrow. Which I will say, by the way, there's so much beautiful and profound Musar in Gemara all the time. Which is, why does he have to tell me this? Otherwise, just skip this part. Save us 3 seconds in Daf Yomi, right? Skip this part and go ahead and just move on to the story. So we'll say, Elamai, what do you see for me? What's the Musha Chana? The Musha Chana is, it's good to take your time before answering questions. Right? Sometimes we feel that when asked something, whatever it might be, whether it's advice in life for someone, a question, dealing with a life issue, that we have to have an instant answer. There is nothing wrong with taking your time to answer a question. Give something some thought, especially, again, if it's something that you've never dealt with before. It says, beautiful. So Rabbi Avo says, Rabbi Yirmiyah, come back tomorrow. Let me think on this a little bit. Sometimes the most incredible thing in the world is to pause before you speak, contemplate the answer you're going to give, gather your thoughts, and then come back with something well-informed. Incredible. So Kiyasa, Rabbi Avo came back. Rabbi Yirmiyah came back. Kiyasa Amalei, Pashat Miyachada. So first, let's remember again, we'll say, Rabbi Yirmiyah asked all of these kashas, right? So essentially, remember again, there are 4 kashas over here. Kasha number 1, do we go ahead and take out the value of the Amona's Mazonos? Question number 2, do we take out the value of the daughter from the previous marriage Mazonos? Question number 3, do we take out the Balchov, right, the debt? Question number 4, if there's only enough Mazonos in the estate, right, who gets it, the daughter or the widow? Okay, so Rabbi Avo says, come back tomorrow. Rabbi Yirmiyah comes back and he says, so Rabbi Avo says, listen to this. Let me answer at least one of your questions. Then Rabbi Ava Amrabasi, Asu Amana Eitzel Abbas, Kibas Eitzel Ha'achin B'nechasim Mu'atin. So I say, interestingly enough, Rabbi Avo only answered question number 4, didn't answer the previous 3. And he said, I'll tell you like this. Chazal went ahead and said, that an amana, right, when there is a choice between, in other words, only enough mazonos for one person, and both the amana and the daughter are claiming it. So Rabbi Abba said named Rabasi that an amana by a daughter is like a daughter by brothers when it comes to nechas and mu'atin. What does that mean? Ma bas etzel achin, right? Just like a daughter when it comes to a daughter when it comes to sons by nechas and mu'atin. Habas nizones va'achan yishol al-psachim. So again, the daughter gets support and the sons fend to themselves. Af amona etzel abas, amona nizones va'abas tisha al-psachim. So Rabbi says, listen to this. So essentially, a daughter by an amona is like, or I should say, an amona by a daughter is like daughters by sons. Just like by nechas and mu'atin, daughters get support, sons get nothing. So too, when there's only enough mazonos for one of them, the amana gets it, not the daughter. Incredible. We'll say absolutely incredible. And that is halacha l'maisa. So for us, the halacha l'maisa that comes out is as follows. 2 pieces of halacha l'maisa. Number 1, when calculating whether or not an estate is nechasim meruba, nechasim mu'atin, we do not take into account other costs. Right? We just look at the value of the estate at the time of death, and that is it. If it's nechasim mu'atin and it appreciates, the sons get that appreciation. If it's nechasim merubin and it depreciates, the percentages established at the time of death, percentages of Yerusha versus Mazonos, are applied even to the depreciated estate. No, we do not remove any costs from the top of the estate when determining nechasim merubin and nechasim mu'atin. If halacha l'maisa there's only enough Mazonos for an almana or a daughter, we give it to the almana. Incredible. Incredible. Both say that's part of the Mishnah. So the Gemara, the Admon said, "B'shel shani zachar hifsadati." So it says here again, we had this interesting exchange at the end of the Mishnah. So Admon apparently was a little bit perturbed, and Admon said, "I don't understand. Because I'm a man, I get nothing." In other words, because Admon was commenting on the case of nechas and mu'atin. So in the case of nechas and mu'atin, the Mishnah said daughters get support. Sons, literally, again, Yahrzeit al psachim, go and beg. Again, by the way, I want to point out, just go and beg is not Chazal encouraging people to go around and beg, right? Just Yahrzeit al psachim is an expression for go figure it out. Go figure it out. Get a job. Do whatever you have to do. But the idea is you're not getting money from the estate. That's the idea. Sa'ad apparently was very offended by this. He was offended. So the Gemara says, "My ka'amar." What exactly is Admon saying? Because I'm a man, I shouldn't go ahead and get any support. Amar Rabbi Hachikam. This is beautiful. V'shil shani zachar v'roi ani lasok b'torah hifsadati. So Admon says again, because I'm a man. And this lashon over here is very interesting. V'roi ani lasok b'torah. So ultimately, again, and I am roi. I will say that this lashon is interesting. This lashon can mean I'm obligated in mitzvos to a heightened level, or in a basic level. Again, I'm someone who learns Torah. So because I'm someone who learns Torah, I shouldn't get Yerusha. To which the Gemara says, I understand. What does that mean? The Gemara says, Amalei Rava. Now remember, that's strange. So what does that mean? Only someone who learns Torah gets Yerusha, but someone who doesn't learn doesn't get Yerusha? The Gemara says, This is what Admon meant to say. Admon was just making a simple statement. Admon essentially was saying, Abosai, again, the age-old adage, Zelo fair, right? Zelo fair. What are you talking about over here? In other words, what Amo was just saying is, this seems so arbitrary. In other words, when there's nechasim merubin, I'm the sole inheritor, and when there's nechasim mu'atin, I get nothing. We'll say, if you think about it, it is an extreme swing, right? In other words, and there's no middle ground, right? It's not like nechasim merubin, nechasim mu'atin, and nechasim beinonim, right? You're either one or the other. So it just is, I was just pointing out just the extremeness of this law of Yerusha, that in one case, nechasim merubin, sons get everything, daughters nothing is the wrong word because they get support. But yet in the other case, sons who normally get everything now get nothing. So Admon was just decrying that. Admon was just saying it doesn't seem to make sense. Again, now again I will say, what do we tell Admon? There are a lot of things in life that don't make sense, right? Live with it. That's just the way that it is. So again, it's just an interesting exchange over here. So what's fascinating about this, I will say, is that the halming of the Gemara is that somehow this is about Torah. This is about Torah. And Admon's saying that because I learned Torah, why should I lose out? To which the Gemara says, interestingly enough, it's going to sound strange, Torah's got nothing to do with it. This is not about learning Torah, not learning Torah. This is about the way that Chazal set up the laws of Yerusha. But I also understand that it makes sense. Remember, so you're talking about a different societal setup, right? Where again, for example, an Almana, her financial safety net was this ksuva, so she has to be supported. For daughters, especially young ones, this was their financial safety net. So the Gemara relied on the fact that a man would have more financial opportunities in Talmudic era than a woman would. So therefore, again, it makes sense to tell the sons, go out and figure it out, and give the daughters the financial safety net of the estate. Admon says it's not fair. What about equality in Mishnaic times? To which the Gemara says, figure it out. Figure it out. Get a job. All right, fascinating. We'll say Mishnah. Hiniach banim ubanos v'tumtum. So we'll say now we get back. So this is fascinating. It's been a little while since we've had a tumtum. So the Gemara says as follows. So now what happens? Yakov died, and he left behind sons and daughters and a tumtum. So remember, tumtum is someone whose gender is unknown. The sexual organs are covered up by a membrane, and therefore, again, unlike androgynous, that has both male and female reproductive organs. So remember again, the tumtum, we just don't know the gender. So now, hiniach bahem banim ubanos v'tumtum. So Yaakov dies, and leaves behind again sons, daughters, and a tumtum. So Bismachan Nechasim Merubin has Charm Dochin also it's in Keva. So what's this in here? Watch this. So now, what we've established in the previous Mishnah, is that Nechasim Merubin, Nechasim Mu'atin. Fine. So now we'll say, so now we know. So we'll say, so now let's say for a moment over here, so now Yaakov dies, so now we have all the kids, right? So the sons know what they get, the daughters know what they get. Now comes Tumtum. Tumtum wants to inherit along with her siblings, right? Her siblings. So what happens? So he comes to the sons, says, hey, I'm one of the guys. So what do the sons say? No, you go inherit with the daughters. Right? So he goes, so Bizman Shadachasim Rubin has Chaim Dochen also it's on the Kevos. So when there's the Chasim Rubin, and the Chasim Rubin, remember again, it's the sons who inherit. So the sons will say to the Tumtum, the truth is, you're not one of the sons. You go inherit along with the daughters. Okay? In the Chasim Muatin, in the case of the now, we'll say, now, what's interesting, and what the Gemara is going to try to clear in that case is, so what does that mean? When they push him to the, so now the sons say, no, you're not one of us, one of the daughters. So does that mean now he is entitled to mizonos like the daughters? So that the Mishnah doesn't say, we'll have to see. Nechasim Muatin, what happens if it's the case in the Shurba? What happens in the case of Nechasim Muatin? Now what happens in the Nechasim Muatin estate? What happens there? Daughters get mizonos, boys get nothing. So the Tumtum shows up. Who does he show up to? He shows up to the girls and he says, "Hey, I'm one of the girls." Right? So he says, "I'm one of the daughters. I'm entitled to mizonos." Hanekevos dochos osa esel scharim. So what happens? The daughters say to him, "No, you're one of the boys. You're one of the boys." Right? And so the Tumtum, unfortunately, is at a Yerusha disadvantage because essentially, again, each cohort could say to him, prove that you are one of us. And if you can't prove that you're one of us, then by definition, you're part of the other cohort. So in the Chasim Rubin, he wants to be one of the sons. The sons say, no, prove that you're a son. You're not a son, so therefore go to the daughters. The Chasim Mu'atim, he wants to be one of the daughters. The daughters say, no, prove that you're one of us. Go to the Scharim. HaOmer. So that's case one of the Mishnah. Okay, so we're going to come back to Tumtum. Rabbi say, just so you understand, the overarching discussion by Tumtum is, what is a Tumtum? Is it, right, three possibilities with the Tumtum? Right? Whoever thought. Right? Three possibilities. What are the possibilities? Right? Boy, girl. Right? Right. Don't say non-binary. Whatever you do, don't say non-binary. Right? Don't say it. Right? Rather, we'll say what it means is, but in all seriousness, what it could mean is, maybe they're just a different category. Maybe there is a third category called Tumtum. Right, Tumtum, which is right. Yeah, I guess there is. Right, I guess we really did have everything first. Right, so I just want to point that out. That's what exists over here. Right? Is it male, female, or we're going to see Beria Bifnei Asma, just their own thing. Keep that in mind. Come to the Gemara. That's case one. Case two. Haomer im teled ishti zachar yital mana. What's that say? Again, Reuven's married to Rachel. Rachel's pregnant. So Reuven says, if my wife gives birth to a boy, I want to give him a monah. So he's essentially giving him something while the child, he's being makne him a right while the child is in utero. So what's the halacha? Yol de zachar yital monah. So it works. Again, if Rachel gives birth to a boy, then ultimately again, the boy gets a monah. Nekeva masayim, yolda nekeva notas masayim. So again, if Reuven says, if my wife gives birth to a girl, I want to give her 200 zuz. So, and Rachel gives birth to a girl, she'll get 200 zuz. Im zachar monah in nekeva masayim, yolda zachar nekeva, zachar notal monah, nekeva notas masayim. So again, same thing I will say. So Rachel's pregnant. He says, if Rachel gives birth to a boy, I'm going to give him a monah, and if it's a girl, 200 monah. So, okay, so then that works. That works. So we'll say, so now, by the way, there's no chiddush. There's no chiddush in these cases, although interestingly enough, we'll talk about this idea that this seems to be like a davar shalom al the olam. We'll talk about that, but Lamaisa, that's not why the Gemara is bringing this up, or Mishnah is bringing this up. The reason the Mishnah is bringing it up is, what about Yolda Tumtum? So now let's say the following case. Reuven goes ahead and says, if my wife gives birth to a boy, I'm giving the boy a monah, right? And if it's a girl, 200 zuz. And now what happens? Rachel gives birth to a tumtum. So what happens in this case over here? So the Gemara says, Yolda tumtum eino notel. So the tumtum doesn't take anything, right? Has no entitlement to anything. Which again, once again, because the tumtum, right? In order for the tumtum to take something, the tumtum has to be able to prove gender. So in this case over here, the tumtum can't prove gender. Im amar kama shetelid ishti yitol hareze yitol. Now, we'll say now, if Reuven said, whatever my wife gives birth to, right? Now, in his mind, he meant boy or a girl will take all of my property. So in this case over here, I will say, and their only child is a tumtum, so the tumtum takes everything, because whatever it is, whether the tumtum is a boy or a girl, or maybe even its own category, either way, this is the only offspring of Reuven, and therefore again it takes everything. Yitov in sham yorish alahu. How is it? Vim ein sham yorish alahu yorish esakol. And in general, again, the Mishnah says, if halacha l'maisa, when Reuven dies, the only inheritor he leaves behind is a tumtum. Tumtum takes everything. Tumtum takes everything. Okay, so we'll say, so now, interestingly enough, let's go back for just a moment. So you remember again, part one of the Mishnah was as follows. So what happens? Reuven goes ahead, or say Yakov leaves behind sons, daughters, and a tumtum. Right? Sons, daughters, and a tumtum. Yakov dies. So now again, what happens? The Mishnah says, if it's nechasim merubin, so what's going to happen? Tumtum is going to come to the sons, and he's going to say, I'm one of the sons. I want to inherit like you. What did the Mishnah say? The Mishnah say the sons could push him to the girls. Push him to the girls and say, you inherit along with the girls. So let's say, so here's what's interesting. So the Mishnah is clearly indicating to us that sons have the ability to prevent him from inheriting with them. The shayla is now what? So does he inherit like a daughter? Right? In other words, well, he won't inherit, but what will he be entitled to? The zonos. So can he claim mazonos, right, like the daughters or not? So dochin also b'shakol kabas. So are we saying that the sons could kind of deflect his claim? But yes, he will inherit like a daughter, i.e. he'll get mazonos. But here's the problem. V'hakatani seifa yolda tumtum eino notel. But we said in the Sefer of the Mishnah, right? The Sefer of the Mishnah that what? That if halacha l'maisa again, right? A man said if my wife gives birth to a boy, he gets a mana, a girl masayim, and she births a tumtum, that child gets nothing. So it sounds like then tumtum is really its own category, neither a son nor a daughter. Amr Abaye says dochin also ve'in lo. You're right. What the Mishnah means is like this. In case number one of Nechasim Merubin, where the tumtum comes to the sons and say, hey guys, I'm one of you and I want to inherit along with you, the sons can say to tumtum, no you're not. Go to the girls. But if the girls kill, what could the girls say? What the girls say? Go to the boys. Right? So the Mesa, essentially each group could deflect him and he doesn't inherit with any of them. The Rava says, no. Dochin also v'yeshlo. No, what it means is the sons could go ahead and deflect into the daughters and he wouldn't inherit along with them. So we'll say, so that's a machlokas. What do you do with the Seifa? The Seifa asan Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. The Seifa is Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. What's Rabbi Shimon Gamliel? Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, Yolda tumtum v'androgynous. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer in Kedusha Chala Aleim. Now we'll say, what we're going to see over here is that Rabbi Shimon Gamliel holds that tumtum is a category on its own. Now, it happens Rabbi Shimon Gamliel's case is a totally independent case by karbanos. This is talking about over here, if halacha l'maisa, you have an animal, the animal is giving birth to a firstborn. Normally, a firstborn animal has kedushas bachar. You don't want the animal to have kedushas bachar. So what can you do? You could be makdish the animal in utero. Now we'll say, again, depending if the animal is male or female, will determine what type of carbon it is fit for. But you could be makdish it in utero. Shimon Gamliel says, but if the animal is a tumtum, then ultimately again no kedusha devolves upon it at all. No kedusha. Shabbos says, the Gemara suggesting is as follows. There's a machlokes in Mishnah. Essentially, there's machlokes in the Mishnah. What is a tumtum? So the first part of the Mishnah seems to indicate that the sons could deflect the tumtum to the daughters. Now the shayla there is machlokes Abaye and Rava. Does tumtum inherit mizonos like the daughter or not? So Abaye says no. Rava says yes. Now what's the logic over here? So Abaye will say, well look, the same way that the sons deflecting to the daughters could deflect to the sons. Right? They could keep ping-ponging back and forth. On the other hand, Rava says no. We'll say, here's what we know about a tumtum. a tumtum is either a boy or a girl. It's either male or female. So it's one or the other. So therefore, a tumtum should be entitled to at least the least valuable position in an estate, which in the case of Nechasim Reuben is who? Is the daughter. So therefore, again, Rava says the sons could defect into the daughter, but he will at least get mizonos like a daughter. So that's nachos. But the Seifa is introducing us a new opinion. So I will say, according to Abaye and Rava, a tumtum is either a boy or a girl, right? Male or female. We just don't know who. So the shayla is, can he collect, can he not collect? Rav Shmuel is the same. Rav Shmuel says, no. A tumtum is neither male nor female. A tumtum is its own category. Is a beria bifnei atzmo. And as a beria bifnei atzmo, I will say it has a totally separate set of halachas. I will say, we have to stop, we have to end a few minutes early. Stop over here for today. We'll pick up, and so now, again, I will say, we've just blown open the wide world of tumtum. And Hashem, more to come tomorrow. Again, we'll see whether or not there's a halacha l'maisa designation there. We'll stop over here. Shkayach, everyone. All right, Chevron Zoom, have a great day, everyone.
Just for the word.
There's machlokes as well. They ever exist.
Right.
But tumtum definitely exists. Yeah, that I don't know.